So I think at that point I started to realize, because early on, especially in undergrad and grad school, you think every decision that you make is so huge for the rest of your life, right? Um, but now I'm starting to think any decision that you make is you're just making the decision that's right for you at that time. It doesn't mean that 5 years from now you would have, or 5 years before you would have made the same decision. And nothing is permanent, right? So you can always make a change later if you feel like it's not something that's working out.
Welcome to the Public Health Millennial Career Stories Podcast, episode number 16. Hi, everyone. My name is Omari Richens, and thank you so much for joining me today. If you have not as yet subscribed, definitely make sure to subscribe to this, leave a review, like it, and share with a friend. I would definitely appreciate that a lot, and that will make my week, day, month, everything. So definitely be sure to do that. Today's episode is going to be with a public health professional in the pharmaceutical slash biotechnology industry. And I think this is an industry that we don't really think about in public health. So I'm really glad that I got to have this person on. And I think she really shares some really insightful information for a lot of public health professionals, not only just for pharmaceuticals, but for just advancing your career, especially in larger organizations. And one thing that I kind of missed on was something I'll be talking about in the end of the episode. So if you really want to get into that, definitely stay tuned to the end of the episode. But we talk about her blog, womaninpharmacareers.com. And it's a platform similar to mine, just trying to give advice to people who are trying to navigate the pharmaceutical industry and specifically women. So if you're interested in that, definitely connect with this person and check out that blog. Um, I hope that everyone is doing well and that you have a great start to your semesters. I'm not really too sure when school starts. I'm kind of out of it, but I'm guessing by the time you hear this, you might start school. So good luck and have a great semester. Or I hope that you're trotting along in work or with those job applications, and good luck, and you're going to have some success soon. And without further ado, here's today's episode. This is the Public Health Millennial Career Stories Podcast, where you'll hear about diverse career stories, career strategies, get tips, and learn from others to help you in your public health career journey. If you want to learn about public health careers, or just hear public health stories, stay tuned because you won't want to miss this. Today, we have a public health professional working in the pharmaceutical slash biotechnology industry. She completed her bachelor's in biochemistry at the University of Delaware. Then she pursued a PhD in cell and molecular biology at the University of Pennsylvania. After this, she went on to complete her Master's of Public Health at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. She also got a prestigious research slash cancer prevention fellowship with the National Cancer Institute. Then she transitioned to the biotechnology company Genentech, where she started as an epidemiologist and has continually grown within the company to become a principal real-world data scientist. We have Dr. Wenny Lin, MPH. Welcome to the show, Lenny. Wenny, how are you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me too, definitely, because it's not usual that I get to talk to someone in the pharmaceutical biotechnology like field. So I definitely think it's going to be very interesting. So thank you for being on the show.
Sure, happy to be here. Yeah, it's definitely not, I think, the most well-known career paths for people in public health, but there are some of those of us in there. So just happy to share.
Yeah, thank you. So how have you been coping during COVID-19?
Yeah, well, this is definitely some unprecedented times, huh? It's like, so there's so much news to keep up with and so much to try to digest. I think, even somebody who has some public health training could have trouble taking in all of this information and really understanding, what's coming out of those trusted sources, and then trying to adapt that to my own individual situation has been really challenging. So really just, coping one day at a time, just take it one day at a time.
Yeah, as you should. So tell us about your personal background.
Yeah, so my parents and I immigrated to the US from Taiwan when I was just a toddler. So I grew up in various cities on the East Coast, mainly in Pennsylvania and New York. And I currently live in Philadelphia.
Okay, thank you. So what does public health mean to you?
Well, so public health to me means the science and the practice of disease prevention. And actually, I think also the promotion of healthy communities and healthy populations. I think that you can't really have a fully functional society without having citizens that have some level of good health, and that goes for both physical and mental health.
Okay, absolutely. So where would you say your journey with public health begins?
Well, actually, so I was thinking about this and I thought, actually very early on, because when my family moved to the US in the early 80s, my dad was a student at that time, and we didn't actually have health insurance. So we relied on the public health centers, free clinics whenever I got sick. And, as a child, we're always getting sick. Or when we needed the vaccines, we would go to the free clinic for that. And then we also received assistance for foods through the WIC program, so the Women, Infants, and Children's food program. And so I remember distinctly as a child that, that covered Cheerios, but it did not cover Fruit Loops or, any of the sugary cereals. So I'd say very early on, I was a recipient of public health initiatives and programs without even really knowing what public health was. And so throughout grade school, I didn't really know what kind of career I wanted to go into. I just knew I had to get good grades, I had to get to college. And there wasn't anyone in my family that worked in public health or any kind of healthcare field. And so it wasn't until grad school where I had the opportunity to start working in a lab that was developing HIV vaccines and doing some research in that. And so I started reading up on HIV vaccines, the HIV epidemic, trying to learn more about disease prevention in general. And I think that's when I came upon, okay, there's this thing about public health and what is that all about? And trying to explore some more by getting involved with some public health organizations on campus and in my city. And that's when I started thinking about a career in public health.
Okay, thank you. And you said that in grad school you thought about that. So I know that you went to Harvard Public School grad school, but was this in your like PhD grad school?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I could share a little bit more,
Uh,
later on
y-
on how I landed there.
Okay, absolutely. And okay,
A
so
little bit of a meandering path.
I feel like that's the path that many people take in public health for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So just to ask you this, looking back on it now and looking to see all the public health things that you've received while you were a child, did that really influence your perspective of public health, would you say?
I think it did because I, I thought about uh, you know somebody would have had to think about the populations that needed these services, and it takes so many aspects of public health, I think, to get something that like that in place, right? There's the policy that's involved, there's maybe the science involved, that the fact that children need good nutrition, and there's science behind that, um, all the way to implementing a program and running the program and then seeing how the program actually works, right? Like, I would say that my family and I are living proof that having those kinds of programs is really good for society.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started university in a bachelor's in biochemistry. What was your thought process for choosing to study biochemistry?
So honestly, I wasn't sure when I started college what kind of major I wanted. I changed majors a whole bunch of times. And I landed mainly in biochemistry after a process of eliminating other majors, I think. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And now that I reflect on that time, I think I had really very little exposure to the world outside of school, right? So when you're studying chemistry, when you're studying physics, if you're studying social studies, it's very little exposure in the curriculum for students to really get an idea of what's out there in the real world in terms of the types of careers that are out there, what you might be striving to achieve in such careers, and what that day to day actually looks like, right? Because all is going to school. So I definitely think that at the time I made that choice pretty naively, and of course the professors were thrilled. I was getting good grades, and they only knew academia, right? And so I was like, okay, I could do school, like, so. So yeah, I ended up getting a degree in biochemistry, and honestly not really sure what to do with it after that.
Okay, and so you said you weren't sure what to do after that, but you did transition into a PhD program. So what was the kind of process like thinking through, okay, let me do a PhD program?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2003, which was a bit of a slow economy at the time.
Hmm.
And so I was looking for jobs in the chemistry, biochemistry, like anyone who would take somebody with a degree like that. And unfortunately, I didn't get a job. And so when I graduated, I thought, okay, well, I'm good at school. Let's just keep going. And I know that you had talked a bit in the past about trying to go to med school, and so I thought, hey, that's a good path too, right? People seem to say that, hey, you get good grades in science, why not try out med school? And so I did not do well on those MCATs. And so but the GREs are apparently okay. So
Hmm.
I decided, okay, well, I got this degree in biochemistry. Let's see if I could study that even further. And I applied to this PhD program. And of course, after I got in, I asked about med school again because I was like, well, come on, you know. And they pretty much laughed at me. But the PhD program was fully funded, which was really important to me, right? I didn't have money for school. In fact, when I went to Delaware, it was because I got a scholarship there. That's why I chose the school. And so because the PhD was fully funded, I thought, hey, I mean, I'm really lucky to get into a program where, I don't have to pay for it, and they're going to fund me a small stipend to go through school. So why not? Um, and I will tell anyone now that, of course, these are not good reasons to go into a PhD program. Okay. I would advise somebody to think long and hard about the area of science that they want to get into before committing to a PhD program. Like, you should really love molecular biology if you're going to go get a PhD in it, you know?
Absolutely. So did you love molecular biology?
So I had a love-hate relationship. I think I was really fascinated by it, but I don't know that I saw myself doing the lab work for an extended period of time. So part of that is actually my evolution to figuring out public health, and that, the direction that I wanted to go into eventually.
Okay. And taking you back a little bit, so you said you got a scholarship in undergrad. So that was the Eugene Dupont scholarship, I'm guessing.
Yes,
Um,
you're
so
right. You're
okay.
right.
So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that scholarship. Did you like actively look for it and apply for it, or was it something that like a tutor or not a tutor, a guidance counselor gave to you, anything like that?
Well, yeah, so that's a good question. So in high school, I applied for a bunch of I applied to a bunch of different schools, state schools, private schools, just to see, what would happen. Um, and I got into University of Delaware, and then they said there is actually an additional scholarship program that you could be eligible for, and they actually had a whole weekend competition, if you will. So they brought in, it might have been something like 100 students into for the weekend, and we got to hear more about the university. But it was also a competition, so there were interviews. We sat down at meals with professors and current students, and obviously you were being judged the whole time, right? So I had to figure out which fork I was going to use. So this was my first time doing that. But yeah, so I think there was also an essay involved during that weekend, and then there was some group discussions as well. So I honestly didn't know how to prepare. It was my first time doing something like that, and so I must have done the right things, because then I was one of the selected students who got the scholarship.
Okay. Well, congrats, and that's awesome to
Thanks.
hear.
Yeah. So and I didn't know that they had it prior to my applying, but it is a very, very very nice program, and it does provide a lot of really good support, for going to college.
Okay. And was the reason that you chose the PhD program you went to also because it was fully funded? Or was that one of the factors that played into it, I should say?
Yeah, that was definitely one of the factors because I guess, even if I had been interested in public health at the time, I think that I wasn't necessarily sure, and I think, we didn't quite have the resources then that I think we do now in terms of being able to network really relatively easily and understand what's out there. You can Google anything now. But I wasn't entirely sure what kind of job would I get, if I were to go into public health or to get a degree in public health. And so at least I felt, take the conservative route, do the PhD where it's fully funded. At least I won't come out with any debt. So maybe that's more of a risk averse kind of kind of approach.
Yeah, but it's definitely smart though. Definitely thinking about what was gonna happen in the future, and I think if you can get school paid for, you should always try to get school paid for. So
That's probably the theme of my my training. But honestly, I mean, when people do ask me about public health these days and whether they should continue getting training, I think this is great that you're even looking into it early, right? Like especially undergrads who are interested. I mean, I think had I known, there are PhD programs in public health or in epidemiology, right? And so had I known about that, maybe I could have, gone straight into public health as opposed to doing a PhD in molecular biology.
okay, and do you think if you knew that public health, they were more public health, actually let me ask you this. So you got your MPH after your PhD program.
Yes,
Do you
that's right.
well talk to me about that because many people wouldn't do that. So let me just hear like what was going through your head because you just went through an entire rigorous PhD program and they're like, okay, let me just do the MPH also.
Right. Well, so you know how I said I didn't really go get my PhD because I like totally love molecular biology, right? Like there were a lot of factors. I
Yeah.
just figured, I don't have a job, I'll just keep going to school.
Hmm.
Um, well, so early on in the PhD program, I suddenly realized, oh wow, this is what I got myself into, right? And so early on, I had a bit of this internal crisis of, is this really what I want to do? So I realized I really had to do some exploration, really had to look around a little bit. And the great thing about having gone to Penn for the PhD is that they have a lot of different programs there. There's a lot of different schools within University of Pennsylvania. And so I was able to audit a few classes. I started talking to different professors outside of my molecular biology department. I took an intro to epidemiology class, and that was really fascinating to me because I guess the way I looked at it was, okay, so in molecular biology, certainly it's a science, right? I can ask certain scientific questions, and then I go into the lab and I try, to work out to see whether the hypotheses that I have are can be shown to be true. But with epidemiology and public health, I realized, okay, so the questions that I ask can still be scientific questions, but they were just more questions that I was more interested in. I realized I was more interested in population health type of questions rather than the molecular biology questions. So actually, um, so I took that epi class and I think I had to hand in a final report at some point, and I was wandering around the nursing building, which is where the professor's office was, and I was looking for her office, and on one of the bulletin boards there was this brochure, and I was looking at it and I thought, oh, this is interesting. So that's how I found out about the NCI, the National Cancer Institute Cancer Prevention Fellowship Program. And what it said was, in order to apply for the program, you needed to have a terminal degree, so a PhD, an MD, a JD, um, and you needed to show that you were interested in disease prevention, specifically cancer prevention. But the key was they paid for your MPH. Yeah.
Okay.
So I found out about this program and I was like, oh, okay. So they pay you to do your MPH. And then as sort of payback, and this is part of the training that you get, is that you do several years of service for the government as a postdoctoral fellow. And so, so when I saw that, and I mean, this was still early on in the PhD, I was like, yeah, if I get through this PhD, I'm definitely going to apply for this because this is really cool, right? I just have to get through this PhD. And so as luck would have it, I graduated my PhD in 2008, which was when the economy was really bad again. And so school and job just seemed like a great idea. I mean, it just combined those two opportunities. First of all, to really then go and specialize in public health with the MPH, but then also get additional training after, right? So it was a really good opportunity. And so that was my thought process as far as, you know, finishing the PhD and then now going for the MPH.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. During your PhD program, I'm guessing that you did a lot of like molecular biology, clinical lab setting sorts of stuff. What kind of experiences from there do you think you took into your MPH degree?
Well, so certainly, yeah, during the time that I spent in the lab and the classes that I took to get the molecular biology degree, it really gave me really solid training in the science of molecular biology, everything from understanding cell mechanisms of action, cell biology, genetics, um, and I was working on animal models, so mice and non-human primates, and so it's certainly that basis for uh, the for science and how all of that works, as well as the methodology for how you might inquire about science, right? Like the scientific method, how you might set up an experiment and the thought process behind collecting data and analyzing data and then interpreting data and how you would want to present that. I think all of that can be really important in public health. And so when I started the MPH program, um, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was taking all kinds of classes: maternal and child health, environmental health, ethics, you know, all the things that they make you take anyway, but I was just really excited about it. um, and so I realized that I was gravitating towards more of the quantitative sciences, like epidemiology and biostatistics, because I think for me, I was able to translate a lot of the scientific methodology, but just using different types of data and asking different types of questions. And so so I definitely think that, you know, while I didn't, you know, have the experiences that my classmates had, whether they interned at the WHO or, you know, a different type of and certainly more public health oriented type of places, I think I brought a certain type of methodological thinking to the program.
Okay, okay, and that makes a lot of sense. So tell me, because it says on your LinkedIn profile you were in the program from 2008 to 2009. So was it an accelerated program, or how did that work? And did you also have to like apply to the postgrad fellowship first and then apply to MPH program, or because you automatically got into the fellowship, you got into the program, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so I applied for the NCI fellowship program first, and was accepted to that. And as part of that, because I did not have any official training in public health, then it was a requirement as part of the fellowship to get your MPH, and they funded you for 1 year. And so there are accelerated programs, the 1 year programs, and there are 2 year programs. And as far as I understand, the Harvard programs. The 1 year program was for people who either already had a terminal degree or were getting one. So there were other students who had already gotten their MD or JD and were doing a public health degree, or there were the people who were in medical school and doing this between their third and fourth years. But certainly I also had a lot of classmates who were in those 2 year programs where maybe they had some work experience or they were coming from undergrad and doing those programs too.
Okay. And what was like what was the rigor of that accelerated program?
Well, I certainly was challenged. I mean, we had to fit in a degree's worth of classes in just a 1 year. I think we started in the July this in the summer and then ended in May at the end of May, which is when the graduation was. And I definitely, we had to take that the full load as much as you can. And so I was really I thought very much challenged because we had amazing professors who, not having, of course, known much about public health before, but then you get into it and you're told like this guy is these professors are world renowned, very well published, and then interacting sometimes even with the PhD students as well, because in those classes it wasn't necessarily that you were only with your cohort. And you definitely interacted with both the MPH students who were there for the 2-year program, as well as the PhD students as well.
Okay. And is there also like an internship or practicum component to that program?
So I think for the 1 year, it's more difficult to do that. But but certainly they did have a certain requirement where you did do a project, and so I worked with a professor. She had some data and a few suggested research questions that I could work on, and so that's where you take what you learned in the biostatistics and epidemiology classes and try to apply that, doing some data analysis with the data that she was able to provide. So that was really, really helpful.
Okay, that makes sense. So you did your PhD, so you probably did quite a few publications throughout that process, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so in my PhD program, I think the guideline that, I mean, I don't know whether that's still the case now, but I think the guideline for us that we should be publishing at least three or so papers in order to graduate.
Okay. Did you try to publish papers during your MPH program, or was that not a thing? Or were you just like not really interested in publishing papers? As you said, you weren't really interested in your PhD program per se.
Well, so during the PhD, I had my own projects that I was trying to get the papers out for. But I also collaborated with some of my other lab mates, and so we would be very collaborative. They would be co-authors on my papers. I might be co-authors on their papers. And so during my MPH year, there were a few publications that were still in the works by some of my lab mates who were still in the lab because maybe they were a couple years behind or something. So I was helping out to see if I could help edit or anything like that. And then in the MPH program, actually, I took a class that was specific about meta-analyses. And as part of that class, actually, we were really encouraged to choose a topic not just for the exercise in itself, but to actually see if we could make it a publication. So I teamed up with 2 other students in the class, and we chose a project that we were interested in, and it did take a while. We certainly didn't publish it that year, but I think it was probably either the year after we finished our MPH or maybe even the year after that it finally got published, just because there was a lot of back and forth about the methodology, and then we wanted to invite an additional co-author. That was this professor that we met who we thought had a lot of good expertise in the topic, and then sometimes you don't get accepted into the first journal that you try. So it's a long process.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So during your postgrad fellowship, what kind of things did you do? I know you said it was focused on cancer prevention, but what kind of things did you do?
Yeah, so actually, so after I got the MPH and I went to the NCI, I hadn't worked on cancer before. And I actually had to choose between, do I go back to the lab and do more molecular biology type of research, albeit in cancer prevention, or do I try something new? And for me, something new was this epidemiology type of research. And so I ended up choosing to pivot, and I was like, I know what it's like in the lab. Let's try this other type of research that I think is really interesting, that I can ask really interesting scientific questions. So I ended up working in the nutritional epidemiology branch, and I was working with investigators who were studying the etiology or what causes upper GI cancers. They had data and biological samples from high risk and cancer patient populations. And I realized that, and they were really awesome in that they gave me the opportunity to design my own studies. So I could come up with some hypotheses and to see if uh, how they pan out either in the data or using the samples. And so in that way, I was able to apply my molecular biology in asking questions about these populations and why they get cancer. So this was everything from looking at the genetics, looking at various lifestyle risk factors, looking at nutritional risk factors. And so my mentors at the time, they taught me basically how to design these epidemiologic studies and analyses. And they also taught me the very basics of how to do statistical programming, right? How to use SAS. So I would say that most of the epidemiology that I know really came from the hands-on learning during that fellowship.
Okay, that is awesome. So what would you say is what was the most challenging part of that fellowship?
So I think the challenging part for me was that I really enjoyed being where I was, and there was so much data to work with, so many interesting questions that could be asked, and I really liked the mentors that I had there, and I thought at the time, wow, I really like doing cancer epidemiology research, and perhaps that this might be an opportunity for me to pursue an academic career. But I think I realized that the challenge was you have to narrow down and kind of be specific and choose a specific area of research that you really want to develop an expertise in. And I think I just had so many different interests and so many different things I was interested in that I was doing a whole bunch of different types of projects in some different areas, right? Everything from nutritional and lifestyle risk factors for cancer to looking at telomerase and telomeres and genetic risk factors for cancer. And so I think it was a challenge in that, I mean, it was a nice challenge to have, but for that particular career path, maybe, not the best thing to have done.
Fair enough. So you said that you did some SAS work in this fellowship, and it seemed like you didn't have SAS experience before. So what was that like, learning on the job how to use SAS?
Yeah. Well, so I definitely did not want to reinvent the wheel. So thankfully, I had a lot of very collegial uh, co fellows there, and also my mentors there, because anytime that I was getting started exploring a new data set, people were really generous with sharing code, and so I could go through that code that they had generated in the past, go through it line by line myself, and really understand what was going on just using that sample code. And then modifying it as I went to figure out, okay, actually, so they did this command. I don't actually need that command. How do I change it to the command that I want? Obviously, there are books, and you could Google these things as well to find examples. And then when I got stuck and there were errors, my mentors and my co fellows were always generous with their time to sit down with me and try to figure out where I went wrong. So I'm very thankful to have had such good coworkers.
Yeah, that is a great team to have to help you and support you in that sense. So
Yeah, for sure.
how long was the fellowship?
I was there for 3 years, so officially as a cancer prevention fellow for 3 years, and then I transitioned to becoming a research fellow after that for a few months.
Okay. And then, so after your cancer fellowship, you transitioned into Genentech where you currently work. So how did this come about? Like, were you actively looking for a job in like the biotech pharmaceutical industry, or how did you find this job?
My husband at the time, he decided to go to medical school. And so we applied all over the country, as you have to. And he got into a school in the Bay Area. And it was, I mean, all medical schools are hard to get into, but you know, when you get into one, you got to go, right? And so we had already been long distance for 6 years. So at that point, I thought, okay, it's time to get into the same place. And so I started looking for jobs out in the Bay Area. And Genentech was one of the companies that I had applied to. And honestly, I applied for academic jobs. I also applied for government jobs. I also, you know, I applied for industry jobs as well. So I was applying in various sectors just to see what happened.
Okay, that's awesome. So what made you choose Genentech then?
Well, it was a hard decision because I think, you know, coming from the public health background, and also from the government, right? Because I was working at the NCI, which is part of the government. Um, Looking at industry, you know, industry doesn't have the best reputation, right? It's always big bad pharma out there. Like, why would you ever want to do that? And so when I got the offer, it was really, really tough. I think I took at least 2 weeks, extended the deadline to figure out if I really wanted to do this. And um, and actually, my husband had said something that kind of made me feel pretty good about the decision. Part of it was that, uh, I mean, he said, of course, pharmaceutical companies are private companies that are or commercial entities, right? Like the point is to make money. Um, but if you are gonna make a drug or be part of making a drug that works for somebody because they have a disease, like think about the impact that has, right? And so I thought about that, and I thought, okay, well, I could continue doing epidemiology research, which is what I was really interested in doing. Um, but if the work that I was doing just added to the body of knowledge about something, like sure, that certainly makes me feel good. But does that have as broad an impact as, you know, being part of the drug development process might have? Maybe not. And so that was part of the thinking for why I decided to try it out. And honestly, at that point, I also thought, um, you know, he's in school for a few more years. You know, I'll just try this thing out for a few years, and if I don't like it, I'll move on to something else. And so I think at that point I started to realize, because early on, especially in undergrad and grad school, you think every decision that you make is so huge for the rest of your life, right? But now I'm starting to think any decision that you make is, you know, you're just making the decision that's right for you at that time. It doesn't mean that 5 years from now you would have, or 5 years before you would have made the same decision. And nothing is permanent, right? So you can always make a change later if you feel like it's not something that's working out.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not think there's anything like a right decision. There's just a decision. And if you don't make any decision, that might be the wrong decision. So just make a decision, because we honestly never know what's gonna come about if we do this or we do that. We can only speculate and think what when you do make that decision, something might happen, and you can look back and say, oh, I could have done the other thing, because you never know what would have happened or what would have changed in that circumstance. So anyway,
Exactly.
yeah, so you started off as an epidemiologist. What was your role as an epidemiologist at Genentech?
Yeah, so I was in a group that was made of epidemiologists, and we supported the different molecules or different drugs that were in either in the trials or were already on the market. And day to day, what that meant was I was mainly doing literature reviews or doing some simple descriptive analyses using administrative claims databases or registries. And the summaries of those literature reviews or the results of those analyses were used in various documents that were submitted to health authorities, for example, the FDA or EMA in Europe. And most of that was documents that would describe or support the risk-benefit profile for a drug. So obviously you want a drug to be effective, but you also want to show a certain degree of safety. And so we have to do a lot of work to show that risk-benefit profile.
Okay. And did you work on that side of like the health economic side of it at any point, or not really?
So not specifically related to health economics. Uh, so I was in the epidemiology group for about a year, and we then had a reorganization. And part of that was they decided that our group, instead of being called the epidemiology group, we would now be called the real world data science group. And real world data, it's a new name being used. For us, it meant using any data that's outside of the clinical trial setting, so outside of your traditional randomized clinical trial. And so that could be administrative claims data, it could be registries, it could be electronic medical records, and nowadays we're expanding to things like the data coming from digital wearables, all the way to using CT scans or other types of images. But when we reorganized from the epidemiology group to the real world data science group, what it meant was that we weren't just doing the risk benefit profile type of analyses. We were now going to increase our responsibilities to working on clinical development. So that meant using observational research to support the clinical trial design. And then also we were going to support medical affairs and market access. And so this is where we actually did work very closely with the health econ people, because we were using observational research to better understand the unmet medical need for our drugs, and then also the disease natural history, because some of those things went into the health economic models. And so while I did not do the health econ type of work, I definitely collaborated very closely with them, because oftentimes, if they can't find something in the literature to use in their models, or if maybe something was missing from their models, then we would come in and see if we could try to do some analyses to provide some of those inputs.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. So did any of your roles expand when that shift happened from epidemiologist to real world data scientist, or was it primarily the same?
So we definitely had a lot of changes. As I mentioned, we went from supporting the risk-benefit profile type of work, and that was mainly pharmacovigilance and safety. And those were the teams that we primarily interacted with, the safety teams. And in pharma, everything is a team. There's teams for everything. And so when there was a reorganization, we started working with the clinical development team, and we started working with the medical affairs teams, and we started working with the health economics people on the market access teams. And what was really cool about the expansion of this work was that not only did I see the part of drug development that was just around the safety aspect of the drug, but now I was seeing a broader aspect of drug development, everything from, okay, the drug has to go into humans in a trial. How do we design that trial in order to show that the drug is effective and safe, all the way to, okay, now the drug, we're filing for market approval. So, filing with FDA, filing with EMA in order for the drug to be sold. But then even beyond that, it's not enough that the drug is available on the market if nobody can get access to it, right? If nobody can pay for it, if insurance isn't going to cover it, then nobody's going to get access, right? Because a lot of times I'm working in oncology and cancer, where these new drugs in particular, are pretty expensive. And so you do need to show the health authorities or the payers, the insurance companies, that there's value to covering these drugs. And so nowadays we do very much focus on not just how much longer are these patients living, but also what kind of quality of life that they have, right? Because you really want to show that that you're providing additional value for the fact that you might have to pay for a lot for these drugs. And so we measure things like obviously lengths of life, but also if we can get at it, if we can get at the data that shows that these people could go back to work, let's say, or have lower caregiver burden, or maybe they have fewer ER visits, or they're able to do more, to be continue to be productive members of society, right? Like that's what we want. So so those are the types of things we think about.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, and then in that same role, I guess you got promoted to a senior real-world data scientist on oncology also. So how long after you moved into the real-world data scientist did you get promoted or shifted into this new role, and what increased responsibilities came with this?
I think it was about 2 to 3 years maybe after I had joined that I got the promotion. And the way it works is that you pretty much have to be doing the job to then get the title. And so uh, so I needed to show that I was working pretty independently, and that I could be a trusted and go-to person on the teams that I was on, and to show that I was bringing value to those teams. And part of that is, am I able to understand the problems that the teams have? Am I able to come up with solutions? Am I able to convince the team members to all get behind the solution? Am I able to execute the analyses in order to get the solution? What is the impact that the solution has, right? So are they able to use it in a filing document? Are they able to, are the health economics folks able to use what I have generated into some of their models, or put them into some of their payer reimbursement dossiers? So I think some of the work that I did, I was supporting an immuno-oncology product that was about to launch. And so I think some of that teamwork and a lot of the being able to deliver some of those things, I think showed the value that I could bring. And those were the things that they were looking for in terms of a senior scientist anyway. And so, like I said, you pretty much have to show that you've already been doing it in order for them to give you the title.
Okay. And it seemed like you had your mindset on trying to take on more responsibilities so that you would be able to advance your career. So or was that something that you planned, or is that like just a natural progression of your career?
Well, I think that, having gone through the PhD program, actually, what I like to tell people about the PhD, if they're like on the fence about it, is that you kind of become a professional problem solver, right? I mean, sure, maybe I'm not doing molecular biology necessarily anymore, but I'm always looking at what are the problems and how can I try to solve them. Or if I don't know how to do it, who can I find that can do that? Or what can I learn in order to do that? And so I think there's that sort of mentality of always being curious and always trying to solve problems, added to the fact that obviously I think I want to make sure that I'm on the right track. And so I was having continued discussions with my manager about what are the expectations of these different roles. Are there opportunities where if I'm missing a particular experience, could she or he look out for me to see if I can get involved with those sorts of things. And so when it did come time to think about the promotion, my manager and I worked on some of the criteria that they had, or some of the guidelines that they had as far as being able to demonstrate some of the things that they found valuable. And I was able to come up with the examples for those types of things. And so I think that having that regular communication with my manager was also very helpful.
Did you have to actively apply to get these promotions, or was it more like you hit these criteria so you were eligible to just get it?
So as I said, I think all companies and all departments will do it differently. The department that I was in, the message that we got was that in order to be considered for promotion, you have to be demonstrating that you were capable of doing or having the responsibilities of that other level, that higher level, and there had to be a business need. And that's where the gray area is, where, you know, you can do everything that you can and say, I've done all of these things. Here's, you know, the portfolio of work that I've done. This is what my teammates are saying about me. But then at the end of the day, you know, the leadership still has to make a call about whether there's a business need for the group to have a senior scientist. And so that's, I think, is you know, beyond my pay grade at this point to understand a little bit more about how that works. But from an individual perspective, you know, I think any kind of criteria that they have shared, I mean, or you just look at the job posting, right? Or if they have posted in the past what a senior scientist is supposed to do, then if you've already been doing those things, then that's a really good rationale. But I did not have to apply specifically for that. Whereas my other roles, because now I had moved into a group for collaboration specifically, and then now into my affiliate partnerships role, I did have to apply for those because they were not a promotion, but sort of a lateral move into a different group.
Okay. And I was just about to ask you about that. So considering it wasn't a promotion, it was a lateral move, why did you want that lateral move into this other part of the organization?
Yeah, so I am really interested in understanding more about the drug development process. And so, as I mentioned before, when our group was reorganized, I was really excited about the fact that we took on new responsibilities, got added to these different teams so that I could see more about how drug development worked, because there are so many different functions, there's so many different departments, and the additional interaction with them really gave me a richer understanding of how all of drug development works. And so there was an opportunity to work in this collaborations group where I would actually be able to work with external partners to collect real world data and help them understand how a pharmaceutical company was interested in using that real world data. And so that was what I was doing in the partner or the collaborations group. And then I also had an opportunity last year to switch into the affiliate partnerships group, which is where I am now. And in that role, well, let me back up a little bit. I think I have to share that. So Roche is trying to lead the way in terms of personalized healthcare. And in the area of oncology, the vision is to make sure that next generation sequencing, so NGS testing technologies, the targeted therapies, and clinical decision support are all available for advanced cancer patients. So we want and we believe that that is what is going to be good for patients. And then on top of that, we want to make sure that we're collecting the data on these patients so that we can see that there's evidence being generated to show that personalized healthcare works, or maybe it doesn't work, right? But we need the evidence to show that. And so parts of that, the access to the NGS testing, the access to the targeted therapies, all of these different technologies, and their availability is different around different parts of the world, right? So in the US, the healthcare system is going to be different than the UK, different from Switzerland, going to be different from Saudi Arabia. And so I'm currently supporting projects where we can work on different parts of that vision. And so I'm involved with the real world data collection part of those projects specifically. And I'm supporting projects that are located in Canada, Switzerland, the UAE, and Lebanon. So it's given me a whole new perspective of the drug development process, because now I'm working not just with the research side of things, but I'm also now working with my commercial colleagues, because and also our medical affairs colleagues, because they're the ones interfacing with the prescribers, the healthcare professionals, or they're interfacing with the insurance companies or the government payers to talk about, well, you know, we believe that these technologies and these drug therapies are going to be good for patients. So, you know, can we work out some agreements so that these are going to be reimbursed and the patients will get access? So it's been a really eye-opening experience to just see a broader scope of the business.
Okay, yeah, and thank you for sharing that. So, what would you say is most exciting and least exciting about your role?
Well, right now in my current role, what's really exciting is that I feel like I'm getting to do a little bit of global health, which was not something that I felt like I went to school for or anything, right? I mean, sure, in public health there is that specialty of global health, but I, you know, certainly didn't subspecialize in that. And so for me, it's been really exciting about for learning about the healthcare systems in these different countries because they're all so different. And I'm really excited to work with my global colleagues and their stakeholders, and the fact that I'm able to incorporate real world data, which I think is epidemiology, into some of that strategy.
Okay, and what's least exciting?
Well, prior to COVID, I was traveling a lot. So I would say the jet lag is the least exciting part.
Okay, how much of your role did you have to travel for? Like, what percentage of work?
Yeah, so it depended on the months and it depended on various deadlines, but I think I was traveling probably about 30 to 40% just in this particular role. In my previous positions um, at Genentech, I was traveling maybe only twice a year.
Okay,
So this
and
has been a big change.
definitely. And I know before we started recording, you said that you currently work remotely. So what was that transition like to work in an office to be having to work remotely?
Yeah, so I started working remotely from Philadelphia after having been in the Bay Area for the 4 years because my husband got matched to to his residency in Philadelphia, and so we moved here. And honestly, I didn't think that I would have a job. I might have to look for a new job, but thankfully, with the reorganization and the growth of the area of personalized healthcare, there were additional opportunities for me to work remotely. And certainly, my current position, I'm working with colleagues all over the globe. So having the flexibility of the time zones, you know, um, being able to have a little bit more overlap with my European colleagues while I'm on the East Coast as opposed to the West Coast certainly does help. But that transition, I think, had its challenges because definitely I missed having colleagues all, you know, really close. And I've definitely had to, I think, you know, earlier than a lot of my colleagues due to the COVID pandemic, but even before that, I had to really get comfortable with using the technologies like video conferencing and setting up, proactively setting up times to speak with my colleagues, just because I wasn't going to be able to, you know, just pass them in the hallways or that sort of thing, you know, to try to maintain those relationships. And I think what's really nice is that I had a lot of those relationships already established prior to becoming remote. And so I was able to maintain some of that and then try to establish new relationships. And the great thing about the role that I currently have been in was that because there was so much travel, oftentimes that's when I got to see my colleagues. And so, so it was actually really cool to be able to travel and see them.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. So you've navigated quite a few jobs in Genentech while you work there. What advice would you give to someone who would like to work in like a big organization and really make an impact to like progress their career?
Yeah, so I think that it's all about figuring out what value that you can bring. And so, as I mentioned before, you know, thinking about what are the problems that are keeping the leadership up at night or what the team is needing and how can you help solve that problem. I think that it's important to try to expand and maintain that professional network within the organization, because then you can learn a lot about what's going on and understand more about the different parts of the company. And then I think it's also really important to cultivate relationships with people that are in leadership positions, or get mentors that and letting them know what it is that you're capable of doing, and what you like doing, because most of the time people do want to try to help you.
Yeah, thank you. And really, I really agree with that, like advocating for yourself and what value you bring, what value you know you bring, and advocating to use that value. Where do you see yourself in the future?
Well, before the pandemic, I think I would have told you that, I'm always open to new opportunities where I get to learn new things, or I get to work in a new area, or have new responsibilities. And and of course, I think what's really important is that I get to work with people that I admire, really like, respect, and trust. Um, but now I think, you know, I'm also really interested. I mean, not to say that those things aren't important, but they definitely still are for me. But I'm also really interested in organizations that have responded responsibly to the pandemic, right? Putting their people first, doing the best that they can to support their employees in this really tough time, and the fact that they want to keep their employees healthy. And then on top of that, I think diversity and inclusion are really important. So and that's not just at my peer level, right? Like, I'm also looking now at the leadership of organizations and thinking, do you have women in upper management? Do you have women in the ladder of leadership between me and your CEO? How many women are there? Or I'm looking at how many people of color are in your leadership. And so those are the things that I'm thinking about these days, as far as any future next steps, because that's the kind of place I want to be working at, right? Those are the types of people that I would want to be working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely like the pandemic and everything has shown a light on those kind of things. And it's really made me appreciate it because my supervisor and a lot of people at my organization came to a Black Lives Matter protest like with me, and that just really shows like where their mind is, where their heart is, and the organization is starting to push to do a lot more health equity stuff now. And
Mm.
just looking forward, like that is going to be such an important thing for me to ask of the organizations, my supervisors, my managers, to really make sure that that's something that they value, because it's something that is important. And even more so now than any time before. Well, I don't even know if that's a nice statement to say, because it matters all the time, but it is definitely at the forefront now. So it's definitely to take the actions to improve on that. So really thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, while these things have always been important, they haven't necessarily been something that I think everybody was expecting to talk about. And so now that the door has sort of opened on these conversations, right, I do think that we should take advantage and talk about it. And the companies and the organizations and the leadership that's comfortable in even having the subject talked about, I think that that's really valuable. And I don't think that's happening everywhere, because I do talk with former classmates or just friends, and while I'll say something like, oh yeah, we just had another town hall about these topics, and the head of the pharma division was talking about these sorts of things, and and my group is trying to change the way we do our recruitment, and my friends look at me like I'm crazy, like their organizations aren't talking about these things. So I really feel really good about being part of an organization that does that.
Yeah, absolutely. So changing topics, I guess, a little bit here. On your LinkedIn profile, you have something very specific saying how to spell your name. I'm because it is Wenny, Wenny. Do you just want to talk about that and the importance of getting your name right to you?
Well, actually, so the name on my driver's license is actually this romanization of my Mandarin Chinese name. Obviously, I got it when we immigrated, and it's very difficult for someone who does not speak Chinese to pronounce the name correctly, and it's simply because the syllable is not really used in the English language. It's like me trying to roll my R's while speaking French or Spanish. Like my tongue just doesn't do that. And so therefore, when I started kindergarten, my parents adopted the name Wenny to make it easier for teachers to pronounce my name. And of course, now I think about it and I'm like, that's not really the best name either, because it's not a common name, right? Autocorrect is going to give you Wendy or Winnie, right? Instead. So so definitely lots of times in my life when people think that my name is misspelling. But about the LinkedIn profile specifically, though, during my postdoc at the NCI, I was on a committee to plan a speaker series for our trainees. It could be scientists, it could be career development people, it could be anything that we thought would be valuable for other trainees. And so those were the early days of LinkedIn, and not many scientists were using it. Professional networking really wasn't something that people were talking about. So, and in fact, the senior investigator at NCI even told me once, he was like, since when did anyone get a job by networking? And I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. But, but in any case, so as part of the speaker series, I pushed to have a speaker who could come in and talk to us about using LinkedIn and other social media. Because obviously, if you're going to apply for a job, they're going to Google you, right? So what do you want to be out there? And so one of the tidbits I got from that speaker was that, okay, so if you have a difficult name or a name that, you know, has a weird spelling or something, then put those weird spellings on LinkedIn, because maybe you meet somebody at an event or a conference or something, and now they want to look you up, but you didn't exchange business cards, so they might not know how to spell your name. And basically, you just want to be able to give the internet the best chance for them to find you, right? And so that's what I took from that training session, and it's still up there.
Okay.
I don't know if it's helping, but it's there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a little bit of SEO. I don't know what the acronym stands for right now. But SEO,
yes, SEO.
But awesome. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So I'm gonna move you along to the last section of the show, the Furious Five, the five
Okay.
questions that I ask all guests. So number one, what advice would you give to a student trying to pursue a career in public health?
So I would say to expand and maintain a network of people who are in public health so that you can learn about opportunities. So I think that's a way that you can learn more about the different career paths, but also to keep on their radar so that if when something does open up, maybe they'll think about you.
Yeah, thank you. Number two, if you were talking to someone wanting to get into your position, what advice would you give them?
So I would say that it's really important to become a subject matter expert. So so my team members will come to me if they have questions about real world data or epidemiology. But I think that it's also really important to be able to think really broadly about other issues too, because the people that you're talking to don't have the same background. So you have to be able to communicate with them. And for me specifically in the industry that I'm working in, you have to think strategically about drug development. So as much as you can think broadly and learn as much as you can, I think those are the things that's the kind of advice that I would give.
Okay. Number three, what's something you're working on improving in your life right now?
I am trying to eat healthier. So trying to eat more plant-based foods and less meat. We'll see how that goes.
Well, good luck. Number four, professionally, do you recommend anything?
Yeah, so I have been listening to two podcasts that I really like, and one is well, so both of them are geared towards women because I blog at women in pharma careers, so I'm really focused on the women thing. But one is called Best of Both Worlds, and this is a podcast that's hosted by two working moms. I think their tagline is something like they love their careers and their families, and it's all about how to make that work. And then the second podcast that I've been listening to has been the Harvard Business Review Women at Work podcast. And I really like that one because it's got a lot of good advice for women and being in the workplace.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I'm blogging at womeninpharmacareers.com. It's a blog that I started with my friend, Michelle Kinder. She is also a pharmaceutical professional, and we are really interested in career development topics. So on the website, you'll find that we write about different jobs in pharma, so the different types of departments that you might find in pharma. We highlight the careers of women in those specific departments. We write about job hunting advice, career advancement topics, and then also working mom challenges. And so we're sharing our stories and experiences, and we invite our colleagues and students and anyone interested also to share their experiences and advice. And we love to hear from professionals of all levels.
Okay, and actually, let's dive into that a little bit because I actually completely skimmed over this and forgot that you told me you did this. So, what got you started doing this?
Well, so Michelle and I actually met at the American Association for Cancer Research, AACR, Associate Member Council. So we were both volunteering for this organization where we were specifically tasked with planning career development events during the AACR annual meeting. And so years after we were both no longer on that board, we had kept in touch, and we were realizing that we were doing a lot of informational interviews where students wanted to come talk to us, or we would be talking with our peers, our colleagues at work, and trying to understand, what does it take to go from scientist to senior scientist, a lot of the questions that you asked me. And we thought, hey, actually, sometimes we're repeating ourselves, sometimes we get really good advice, we should put that somewhere, and so we decided, let's start this blog and put that advice on the web and see if anyone finds it interesting. We started a Facebook group so that it could be a community where people could talk about these things, share ideas, because I think there's a lot of sometimes hesitation about talking about these things. So we're hoping to just kind of normalize talking about careers. And then because we're women in pharma, we're like, well, we'll talk about ourselves then.
Awesome, and that's a great platform to have. What is the URL for the website?
It's womeninpharmacareers.com.
Okay, great. And I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Well, thank you so
Thanks.
much for coming on the show tonight, Wenny. I really appreciate your story, and I hope to keep connecting with you and just follow your story and see where it takes you. And I just appreciate you sharing everything that you have learned and done throughout your career.
Sounds great. Yeah, let's keep in touch. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode, listening to me interview some wonderful guests who share some very powerful and insightful information that I hope that you can take and translate into your life and in your career to really advance it and help you. I know that I found this helpful, so I hope you do too. Definitely subscribe, review, and share this with a friend. I appreciate it. I appreciate you listening, and I hope that you're doing well. And I hope you tune in next week to listen to me interview someone else. And next week should be a really good interview, and definitely stay tuned. So thank you so much. Public Millennial out.